welcome to another episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast. This is Julie Podewitz, CEO and founder. I have two fantastic guests with me today. I'm really looking forward to learning from John Lariccia and Maggie Seybold with WelcomeHome Software. Welcome, welcome.
Hey, Julie.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
And John, it's welcome back because you and I had a chance to chat a few months ago on the podcast.
Yeah, we seem to chat often.
Yeah, we do. We do.
We record it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Some of those aren't. This time around, I wanted to invite Maggie because you all started a new division at Welcome Home called Customer Insights. And Maggie, you had the division up. Is that right?
That is right. It is brand new at Welcome Home. I've been here for about 3 months getting it started. But really the whole idea is to take the wealth of data that sits behind Welcome Home and find a way to package it up and give it back to the market in a way that is helpful for our customers and for senior living in general. But the idea existed well before I came on. So John, if you want to expand more on it, but we're really excited for our first report year in review that launched just a couple days ago.
Yeah, no, as Maggie said, at the very beginning of starting Welcome Home, I had this view that not only could we help senior living sales professionals, sales and marketing professionals with the very best CRM out there, but we'd get to a point where we'd have a massive amount of data where we could start to mine that and find ways to be helpful, whether it's inside the software or outside the software, by looking at insights and looking at trends and engaging. And once we got the data, and it's like, well, someone needs to dive in. And I scoured the universe, and I found Maggie, and she was the perfect fit for us. So we brought her on. She came from a management consulting firm where she had done a tremendous amount of analytics and sales and marketing excellence work. We sent her up to Brentwood to get a little taste of senior living with one of your workshops, Julie, and you might not have noticed her. And it was busy. It was a full house, but she benefited from that and spent a ton of time over the past 3 months, not just with the data, but with our client base. And so we're very excited to have her and to have that team up and running and growing. And their very first output is this year in review, looking back on 2022 and looking ahead to 23.
Oh, I am so excited to kind of get a sneak peek. That's this week, right? You're doing a webinar releasing some of the high points.
Yep. Today we are doing a walkthrough. Well, we did our first walkthrough yesterday. We have another one today. We'll go through the full report. It's 31 pages, talk through any questions, look through the trends we saw in 2022 and some of the takeaways to carry forward into 2023, and excited to share it with you as well and just have a conversation about it. Julie, you have so much experience in this space, and I'm really excited to just discuss it and talk through what might be helpful for 2023 for our customers and for operators in senior living. That's
great. Well, let's dive in. First of all, you said, John, a massive amount of data. So can you, what is massive? What's a data set look like?
Yeah, so Welcome Home now is over 100 operators across 1,500 communities.
Wow.
That are on the platform. Some have been on the platform for multiple years, but regardless, when any of our clients come on board, our bias is bring all the data, right? Yeah. So if you've been in operation for 30 years, we want 30 years worth of data. And because the last thing you want is for a sales director saying, I know I had this, right? And so that's the data set that we're looking at. We obviously will augment it with third party just to look and confirm what are we seeing with other with other data sets. And someone like a Nick will publish data, and so we've included that as well. In terms of what is that in that data set across those different communities, obviously you have occupancy data and all of the drivers of it. So move-ins, move-outs, move-ins by reason, move-ins by count, by lead source, length of stay you're able to calculate. And then the nice thing about Welcome Home in particular is every single activity that is being done is being auto-recorded and auto-logged. And so the number of emails, number of texts, number of phone calls that are being done on a prospect as well as referrer basis. And so all of that sits within the data set as well.
Well, I love data, and or maybe a better way to say that is solving the occupancy puzzle, looking at data to build a strategy. So
Right.
I wasn't, math was not my favorite subject, but I do love numbers, and I love what it tells us, what story. We have a finite amount of time in the sales seat, and we have way more to do than we do time. It really is not necessarily even about getting it all done. It's the what. What should we get done? The priority. So Maggie, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. Can you share like a couple of
right before you
data
get
points?
there, Julie, we completely agree. And Maggie doesn't head up our customer data or our industry data. It's all about insights. It's great. You sit on a mountain of data. Maybe I want to dive in, but tell me what matters. So Maggie, go tell her what matters.
All right.
I will.
Tell me. I got my pen. I'm ready to take notes.
Well, yes, notes. So I'll just quickly say before we dive in, the report is available for download. We'll include the link in the show notes if people want to follow along and dig through. It is 31 pages, and we don't have, all day. So I'll hit the highlights, but I encourage everybody to go through it and, take what is relevant to your communities. And of course, reach out with any questions. We're listening. We're hoping to continue to improve. So I'll just make that quick plug. But starting from the top, as you might have seen in many other industry reports, we're seeing occupancy rebound, which is very exciting coming out of the pandemic. I think what's particularly interesting and exciting about this report is, yes, we're seeing occupancy rebound, but we've seen it, felt differently among, different regions, different care types, among different communities and customers. So we spent a lot of energy over the past month or two really unpacking that story and seeing if there were any takeaways for our operators to absorb and use to really boost their performance in 2023. So I'm just going to focus most of this conversation on what those, top performers and dynamic players did in 2022. And we can talk more generally if it's helpful, Julie. I'll look to you to steer, but just, pause me at any time. I think kicking it off just from the top with occupancy, if we look at it by region, we saw the Northeast and the West rebounding the fastest. Again, the full data set's in the report, so you're happy to dig in on your own. Similarly, we saw independent living with the best rebound across the care types. So just setting the stage there. When we look at the winners of the year in 2022, we looked at the occupancy data and tried to pull out the communities that had significant growth in occupancy month over month in 2022, excluding lease-ups. So we named that group in the report the dynamic group, the group that really, did something special to drive occupancy forward, and paid attention to that group as we looked at the sales funnel. So new leads, tours, and move-ins, looked at what their activities looked like, and then, wrapped it all up with lead sources at the end. So I'll just walk you through what that looks like. But we'll start by saying there are just a couple key headlines to keep in mind as we do this. One is, more is better, but it's more of the right thing. So we'll talk through that a little bit when we get to activities. The second is a little bit goes a long way. I'm sure anyone who has sat in the sales director seat feels that, but it's helpful to get the validation. And finally, data adoption is so critical in this time to help people feel confident in deriving a strategy based on the data that they have. So we'll continue to reinforce these messages throughout, but I'm going to go ahead and jump in if there aren't any questions at this point. Julie, anything?
At the edge of my seat, Maggie. I do agree with more is better, but more of what?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So again, looking at this dynamic group versus the industry overall in 2022, when we look at the sales funnel, so we look at new leads, initial tours, and move-ins, not only did this dynamic group have more new leads, so they're doing something special behind the scenes to get this inbound traffic, they also have stronger conversions along the funnel. So they are converting leads to tours more efficiently. They're also converting tours to move-ins more efficiently. And, even if the difference is only 2% or 5% higher than the industry, little changes pay off, and it ends up being, you know, a stronger new lead to move in conversion for that dynamic group versus the industry overall, looking at, you know, 11% versus 10%, which again is small, but a little bit does pay off. I think when you start to look under the hood and think about what is driving the differences here, what is driving that efficiency along the sales funnel, you know, it's all about doing more activities, but doing more of the right ones. So if you were to look at activities completed for a move-in, this dynamic group is actually doing less activities for a move-in than the industry average. Your initial reaction might be, oh, that's odd. That's not what I would expect. When you dive into the core activities, so thinking specifically about calls and texts and emails, they're doing a lot more of that. So what they're doing is they're cutting the fat. They're doing the things that matter most and focusing on that, being very deliberate about it. And as a result, seeing those better conversions and stronger occupancy over the year. You know, not only is it about doing more of those core activities, but specifically focusing in on calls as well. They do a higher share of calls as a percent of the total activities they're doing than any other activity. So, you know, circling back to the original idea we have in senior living that, you know, as personal of a touch point you can get is always the best. You want to be able to really hear these people ask those vulnerable and emotional questions and be a partner to them in their journey. So we see that validated in the data as well. That was a lot. I'll stop there. Any reactions, Julie? Anything you'd add, John?
Quick question. So calls, are you defining that? I should ask open-ended. How are you defining? Is those attempts or connects or both?
So they are completed calls.
Completed calls.
Yep.
Right. And when you said that the top performers or the dynamic performers are doing less, but more effectively, that makes perfect sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it makes perfect sense that they have stronger conversions.
Mm-hmm.
And so you said they're doing more of the right thing. So is that to say more connected calls and less what?
Right. So activities in Welcome Home can mean a whole host of different things. It could be, you know, paperwork. It could be completing an assessment. It could be, you know, ambiguous note taking. There are lots of things that you can log. So what it comes down to is being really deliberate about how you're spending your time. And an additional data point that we haven't mentioned yet is we also looked at the time spent in the CRM for each of the groups we profile in the study. And, you know, that dynamic group is only spending 5 more minutes a day in the CRM than the average. What that tells me is an incredibly positive story. It's that you can accomplish a lot more in just 5 more minutes by being very targeted about what it is that you're doing. So, you know, having a plan as you go into your day and being very specific about what you'd like to accomplish in that day can be helpful for sales directors.
Sure. It may also, Maggie and John, be that the top performer or the dynamic performers are spending longer on the phone, you know, perhaps longer tours. They're going out and doing a home visit. It's very important to be in CRM and doing even the things that we don't really love to do, which is the cooler leads and trying to warm them up. But the most impactful activity, right, that's going to move the needle is it's time in front of a customer or planning. So that's a very interesting stat.
Right.
So you Julie, you hit on something that I was going to highlight, and you were a great assist. Those that actually are planners do dramatically better than those that don't. Right. And so again, when we look and dive into the data, when we saw that a sales director is purposely blocking time, is making notes, that all they're doing is planning, and they're not spending hours sitting and navel gazing, but they are spending a couple of minutes on every prospect that they are reaching out to every single week in order to think what is going to make that call impactful. So I'm not just checking in, right? I'm calling and saying, you know, I heard that your dog had to go to the dentist. I thought about it. How's he doing? Right? Or spending that additional time to say, all right, instead of doing the normal tour, I'm going to take them directly to activities because I know that this is what that family cares the most about, is to how that senior mom, dad, whoever it might be, is going to be active. Let me start there rather than start to show the rooms. It has an incredible impact. And so the dynamic group plans more, planners overall have dramatically better. And I think, again, this is what's so hard about senior living. It takes so much activity to get someone to move in. And so you feel like you're a whirling dervish, and that's great, right? But there's dividends that are paid by just taking a little bit of time, like blocking some time on your calendar to say, all right, when I am a whirling dervish, when I am in motion, how is that intentional, right? How am I putting that within a broader context for this prospect, for this referrer, for this community?
No, you make a great point, and it is definitely a challenge. Sitting in that seat and speaking, somebody who is fast, that I try to get a lot done, and I move, go. It's discipline to stop. I'm speaking for myself, and to plan is so critically important. And I do, because I tend to be, let's get it done, go. That the power of stopping and planning and thinking. And it's a real challenge for us who are like, oh, wait, I got to get this done. And we have this pressure that those that are sitting in the sales seat, where's my move in? How many deposits? What do you got? Who the hot lead review. And meanwhile, why are you staring out the window? It's a real balance of, like you said, activity, doing it, and there's a lot to do, and skill, and that planning plays into that skill side of it.
Sure. And I think, to your point, Julie, this is pressure that all sales directors feel. And part of our hope with this report is to, one, validate what our sales directors are feeling and our regionals are feeling, but two, spotlight what the best are doing and share that knowledge, because it is hard to get, best practice and learn. And when you're in that sales director role and managing so much. One thing I'll just add on your point and on John's point on planning is, planning in our data set was less than 1% of the total activities logged in 2022. Not very many people are doing this at all. So it's a very small thing, a very incremental change that can drive huge success. And when John mentioned that they were more successful, we're talking about 91% average occupancy over 2022 versus 76. So this is a huge difference. And it comes from a very, very small deliberate action. So, one takeaway from the report is just to spend that time, like you mentioned.
A quick question here. So you also mentioned that the stronger conversions and higher number of leads. That's a bell that goes off in my head. Is where you might know where I'm going with this. You can have all the leads in the world, right? So it's talk to me about that. I would assume we're talking more of a higher converting lead, not just more leads.
So when we look at the industry average, let me pull up the right page. 31-page reports, tough to navigate sometimes. So we saw on average 38 new leads for the industry.
Okay, that's interesting.
48 for the dynamic group. So again, it's more, it's 10 more. It's not a ton, just 10. But again, this is a game of inches, right? Like a little bit goes a long way, especially when you have those marginally higher conversions at every step of the funnel. When we actually started to dig in and look at what the profile of those leads coming in looked like in 2022, we also found some fascinating things. We didn't go as deep as to cross-cut these dynamic groups by lead source, but we looked at lead sources as a whole. And I'd love to share some of those findings with you, because I think there are some real tactical takeaways and considerations in this section as well. So just, starting at a high level and painting the picture, for 2022, more than 75% of incoming leads came from online and aggregators. This is a change, and this is a challenge as well. It's a new reality that many of our sales directors have to deal with every day. I'm sure anyone who's sat in the sales director seat has felt that pressure of the, inbound, lots coming in from online and aggregator, and how to deal with that and how to manage your time.
So this is a combination of organic, digital, and web leads, as well as the aggregators.
Yep.
Okay.
And then if you look at move-ins, almost half of move-ins are being driven by the same sources. So, sales directors are putting in a lot of time when it comes to dealing with those online leads and those aggregator leads. When you start to dig into it a little bit though, and look at the actual conversions, so of the total leads that came in from aggregators, how many of those moved in? Only 4%. For online, it's only 6%. Those are low numbers for the amount of work it takes to move in an online or an aggregator lead. When you compare that to referrals, the conversion rate for a professional referral is 19%. For a non-professional referral, it's 23%. So suddenly you start to see a different picture starting to come to light. I think, and we'll dig into, the different types of nurturing it takes for each type of lead source. But the immediate message for me is, okay, working with these groups is very different. So knowing what it takes to move in an aggregator lead source or an online lead source versus someone who's coming from a referral, you need to have separate strategies for those things. So I'll pause there, but I'm excited to get into the activities per move-in data, length of stay, just to start to paint this picture a little bit more.
Hey, John.
John,
No, I thought, John, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. The reality is, again, more is better, and you have to do both. What we've realized after COVID, not just with senior living, but every single major life decision that people are making, whether it's buying a car or buying a house, everyone starts online. And so you have to have an online strategy. People that are reaching out, whether through Place for Mom or through your website, it's a human being behind that. Now, it is a human being that's going to take a lot more work to move in and is going to move in at a lower rate and is likely going to stay less than something that you're going to get from a friend or family or an employee referral, but it's still a human being in need. And so you have to have a mindset as to how am I dealing with the folks that are coming through those channels at the same time that you're doing everything in your power to minimize the need to rely on those folks. Because someone that does come through an event that is a friend and family member is going to stay at almost twice the length as someone that you're going to get online. And if you just think about the effort that you spend, the dollars that you spend, what would you want in the whole mix to be? So that's the one thing that I'd highlight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did recently a couple of things as I'm taking notes, but the study around is external business development, is outreach, is community presence worth it? And by doubling, so if you get one professional referral a month, which is not unusual, it's about one, maybe two, if we're being honest. If you go from 1 to 2 or 2 to 4, and just do with the conversion metrics from tour to move in for a professional, you're talking anywhere from 4 to 8 additional move-ins a year. And even if it's one a quarter on average rent and care adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And those move-ins, those residents, those prospects are more likely to refer.
Yeah.
So even if just half referred, that's an additional move-in. And in the whirlwind, it is difficult when you got the 50 or 48 leads, 38 leads coming in, and you're right, John, they're humans. They're human beings with need. We can't dismiss them, even though the conversion rate, even the connection rate, or the qualification, may not be as high. It doesn't negate needing to respond. So we'll have, what's the balance? What's the balance, right?
Yeah. And then again, what was implicit in your statement, also just want to highlight, not only do they refer their friends when they come from professional or non-professional referral sources, they stay longer. So you are selling someone
right
that you would have to sell 2 or 3 other people in order to fill the same vacancy.
Very good point.
Think about what kind of community that are you building, community with capital C and a community with a lowercase c. It's very different when you have a building that is filled with long stay residents. I mean, we all have gone in there. It's a lot easier to sell something where I could walk around and say, hi, Julie, Julie has been here since 2017. Hi, Maggie. Maggie has been here since 2020. I've been working here for 7 years. It just is so much easier to keep a building full when folks are there for a very long period of time.
Well, sure. I mean, we talk about the culture and
Right.
the emotion, and a culture and emotion is people driven, and our business is very personal. You can't take business personally, but we are in a personal, high touch
Yeah.
business, which is why we all love it. It's that balance. And yes, my dad, by the way, is one of those, moved in 2017. He's still in his community. So
Love it.
quite the ambassador.
And it came from a referral, I'm sure.
And he's absolutely. I used to, he used to volunteer to help people on tours, to do and speak very highly, as he's very, very happy where he is, very happy. So Maggie, I did want to ask a real quick question. You talked about the conversion metrics. Was that tour to move in or lead to move in for professional referrals? Because that seemed low to me.
Lead to move in. Lead to move in.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And, John was starting to allude to a little bit was when we look at the activities per move-in for an aggregator we're looking at 3 to 6 times more activities per move-in per lead.
Sure.
And only is it that much more work, but it's that much more work in a very condensed time period. So it's very intense. And I think what we anecdotally hear from our customers is it's hard to focus on other things when you're getting flooded like that. So being aware that this is the type of work that you have to do for an online lead or an aggregator lead, we're all learning how to communicate over these channels. Being aware of that's really important so you can block your time and say, I'm going to dedicate this much time to referrals this week. I'm going to dedicate this much time to sending up follow-up notes. And I'm only going to spend X amount of time on aggregator and online leads. And I'm going to make sure I'm focused on the ones that I'm pretty sure will convert, because it's very easy to get lost in managing all those leads at once. And so this is just another plug for understanding your historical lead source data so you can see what's worked for you in the past and lean into it a little bit more deliberately versus just taking things as they come, which can feel very overwhelming, when you're getting so much inbound.
Yeah, and a slight plug for a virtual sales specialist. That's what we've just almost on accident last year started leaning into. Hey, for an hour a day, a couple hours a day, you have an extremely highly skilled, very successful sales director, regional director in your database, and doing things like new lead response. We're seeing those connection rates increase. We're seeing tours increase, seeing occupancy increase. It's like having a really a part-time member in your team. And for those that can do something like that, it's hugely impactful. So that, so that the on-site professionals can continue those really, really high impact face-to-face activities. Yeah. What else, Maggie?
Well, we could talk about it all day. I think I'd love to just honestly, Julie, have a conversation with you about the challenges up ahead and how data can enable meeting some of those challenges. I mean, as we've gathered feedback on this report, as I've spent time in the market talking to people, staffing is a huge issue in 2023. Turnovers. I mean, we did a survey. We saw that 40% of our survey respondents in senior living sales positions had been enrolled for less than a year. That is an incredible, I don't want to use the word burden, but you've got to train people. You've got to get them ready, set the standards, get them used to their technology tools. That's a huge challenge for the industry. Not only that, but data adoption standards are mixed. You see some people spending more than 2.5 hours a day in their CRM, and some people are spending 10 minutes. And, expectations for different types of roles and stakeholders in sales looks different as well. And then finally, we also see margin compression. So things are getting more expensive. It's not just in senior living, but in senior living specifically, it's getting more expensive to acquire a lead. At the same time, our pricing power is pretty flat. So thinking about how to meet those challenges and how data can support you, to us, it's just a matter of having that transparency and visibility so you can allow it to inform your decisions. But I know that you love data too, and would love your thoughts on any of those things.
Boy, that's first of all, I mean, I'm going to ask you guys what piece of advice that you would give anyone listening, a regional, a community sales director, an executive director. My thought is we're seeing everything you just mentioned, that the turnover in this position costs, it's millions of dollars in this business, millions of dollars. So it's not just the open position, but as like you said, as we're onboarding and we're continuing that hamster wheel of onboarding and training, and then needing to turn, okay, they know how to turn their computer on a little bit CRM, and I got to go over here and help them on board. And this position of selling senior living is a very high level skill. And it's simple. If you're looking at steps, you're looking at the funnel, and I love WelcomeHome's overview screen. That's all the data. It's really very simple. It's not easy. On the human component, we're selling something that's expensive and people need, but they don't want. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of touches. So to the best sales or the superstars or those dynamic performers are those typically who have endured, and who've really leaned in over the course of time. And it takes a lot to do that. And the other thing I would say is, probably since I've come into the business, is training and teaching and supporting operations to think like salespeople. Revenue. When we first started, I first started in the business. We didn't say sales, we didn't say revenue. Money is bad. We care for people. It was a different. It was a different day. People almost lined up, and you went on a mail or you went on a wait list, right? And things changed, and certainly the Great Recession in 08, 09 really changed, and we need salespeople. But what we do need to think about is supporting our salespeople to think like operators. So we talk about a sales focused culture, and I have 100 times. I'm leaning into the operations focused culture, and sales and revenue is a first tier under running a business. And so using the operations focused is time management, data, cost per move in. Is it a paid source? Is it an unpaid source? Where do I put my time? Giving them a concession to get in on the very last day versus maybe to get somebody in the next week without needing to give a concession. A lot of different ways that, because you said margins are so compressed, that it's 100% occupancy, but at what cost? I think that's the next step, right? After we get these basics down, and we're all very focused as where we need to be.
Yeah, and Julie, I think that's spot on, because the nice thing is, after the recovery, there is a significant portion of communities now that are in the 90s in terms of occupancy, but the sales team still has a little bit of PTSD. And I was just talking with an operator who was a little surprised and frustrated that her sales team came with a building that was 96% occupied, and they're asking for concessions. And she's like, this is not the time, right? And so you have to sit there and be very deliberate, which is, especially if you're regional, but even if you're in a community, as to, all right, what is the lie of the ball right now, right? And therefore, what is my priority? And if I'm in the high 90s or in the low 90s of a building, it suddenly shifts. It's not every single move in's a good move in. And I need to be deliberate as to where am I spending my time, because I'm not thinking about who's going to be there next month. Of course you are a little bit, but who's going to be there in 2024? How do I get those folks in my pipeline now? How do I get the referrers nurtured that are going to generate that pipeline now? And how do I think about the economics of my building and my business? And so that's again, that's not every community, that's the minority of communities, but if you are in that place, the same kind of thing applies, which is be deliberate. If you're in a building that's 60%, all right, now let's be deliberate there. what's the playbook that I want to execute? How do I leverage my technology? Ideally, if it's Welcome Home, but if it's not, something else, in order to take the massive amount of necessary but not sufficient busy work off my plate. How does that happen intentionally? So then I could use my human time in a way that's going to really move the needle. So.
No, it's a great point, and there's so many components wherever you are, start there. This is a good
Yes.
point, John. So, if your team isn't using a CRM, if they're not using it, or not using it well or thoroughly enough, not getting the data, not responding to prospects quickly, fill in all those pieces, and when to whatever stage whatever staircase you're climbing,
yep.
then look at, okay, what got us here, great, what's going to get us there.
Exactly.
And yeah, you make a really good point, and that's why there's always something to think about and something to strive for, which is why we never get bored.
Yeah, and that's it, right? This is an incredibly hard job, but the plus is you're always learning, right? There is always something new to learn. There's always something to grow and develop. And something could be, how do I deal with a family that has 7 different siblings in 6 different states? And some of it could be, how do I think about being deliberate as to who's the right next moving? So it's fun.
All right. Well, what are our takeaways from all of this? What would you like? If we didn't have time, which of course we're going to study all 29 pages. But if we didn't, we don't, what advice do you have, or what should I learn?
Mm-hmm. I think what has been sitting with me over pulling this report together is data can be the backbone of driving success in 2023. It's just a matter of having a good grasp of it. And there are a couple of things that go into that. It's one, having standards and expectations around the data you want to put in that database and being clear on that, setting measurable goals. So you're supporting yourself, you have those continuous prompts to do what will work in your specific community or situation. I had one stakeholder at an operator tell me it's kind of like Moneyball. You can look back at your historical data, figure out what you're good at, and lean into it. And I think, especially with Welcome Home, we've worked really hard to make that easy to do. And so, reading this report and reflecting on your own lead source analysis, or reflecting on your own activities data on what has worked for different types of leads, can be really helpful, because it helps you define your strategy, and you can just put the playbook in place and run with it, free up some mental space. So I think my takeaway is your data can help you if you just set aside the initial time to understand what it's saying. Right. And it's not easy, it's hard, but at Welcome Home, I'm here, your CSMs are here. We want to talk to you about it. So use us and use the data we're giving you. We're, going to put out a whole series of case studies on lead source management. So more to come. But, we're here for you, and, whatever tools that we can help you with, please, I'm all ears.
John, I remember, it feels like a long time ago, and it really isn't in the big scheme of things, a handful of years ago, when you were pre-launch and you said the goal among many, really in supporting the business and supporting the industry, but that you really wanted to build a data set and build value around what you can give back and into what we do here in sales and marketing and operations. And look, snap of a finger.
Snap of a finger.
Oh my gosh.
And remarkably, we both look younger.
And by we both, you mean Maggie and me?
Sure.
My quick takeaway, or I don't know if ever have a quick takeaway. A couple of things that you said, and I am going to read, me, I'm going to read all 29 pages multiple times, is that it's incremental, micro change. So if you think, oh gosh, I'm at 60%, or I've only been in this business or 3 months, or I've been doing this 3 years and I'm spinning my wheels and I could never do it like Elizabeth can do it. It's micro change. It's micro improvements. It's not that the dynamic performer is doing 50 times the work and, 10 times the conversions. It's choose something, either one action or one skill, and really narrow in on that. And in order to identify that is knowing what your data is telling you, right? So I'm sure you've heard of the Simon Sinek, find your why.
Yes.
And that's great. We find our why. Mine is find your what. What is causing the cause and effect? So first find your why, now find our what. And using your CRM data, certainly if you're in Welcome Home, the great data, whether you're using Welcome Home or another CRM or another platform, I'm sure your data is going to be shared with everybody, right? In the space, we can all learn from one another. Anything else?
Nope, I think you hit it well.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And I can't wait to touch base again and hear more from the Welcome Home customer insights. And thank you all for what you do for our business. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast. If you want to learn a little bit more about Grow Your Occupancy and what we do, you can find us at growyouroccupancy.com. Thank you.